a second to sign in here. Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit about HomeKit, which is Apple's home automation platform. Kind of how to use it from an app developer perspective, as well as kind of how it works under the hood. It's pretty proprietary protocol, but I can give you some insight on how it works and how it's all put together. I work for a company called August, and we make smart locks. So this is an August smart lock, and people had asked about it earlier, so I can just show you guys a little bit about it before I start. It's a retrofit, so you keep your existing deadbolt, key, everything, and then you just take off the thumb screw and you just pop it on, and it just kind of just latches on to the mechanism and supports a whole bunch of different door formats. So it came out maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and it uses Bluetooth and low energy, BLE, and then starting earlier this year, we started supporting HomeKit. So you can connect to it with an app. So I'll just show you a quick demo here. Connecting to the lock here, tap it. Oops, there it goes. Plays a little song. Lock and unlock it. Has a lot of gears in there to make sure that it works with all sorts of doors that have, there's a lot of poorly aligned doors and door mechanisms in the world, which is kind of a hard problem. So what are some of the other HomeKit automation platforms out there, and how does HomeKit compare? For the Apple's, kind of the central controllers are all made by Apple, whereas Weave and Brillo, which is just kind of on its way out, it's kind of phone-centric, but there's a lot of third-party kind of hubs that can control the devices that are going to be manufactured. SmartThings, it seems like they mostly make their own stuff. It's like Samsung's kind of world, but they may support other third-party devices. There's a tablet service called Wink that it links with a variety of devices, so it's kind of like a hub that works with other devices. Belkin, who makes all those expensive HDMI and Ethernet cables, they have their own system, and again, it's mostly their own products that all kind of work together. The advantages of Apple's is it's pretty secure, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's integrated with the OS, so it works with Siri, and it will support some new stuff going forward that's kind of integrated deeply into iOS, and you have your phone with you all the time. So it is something that has an advantage over other platforms. Apple's devices are more expensive, maybe because of the certification process. But they also have Apple HomeKit has a really good setup process as well. A little bit about the history. And iOS 8 launched in 2000. It launched with iOS 8 in 2014. There wasn't a lot of devices out there. There weren't a lot that supported it until iOS 9 because of some of the Apple encryption requirements and just delays getting to market. In iOS 9, they changed the user model. It used to be able to have a lot of control over managing users, and they kind of took that out. So now there's just kind of a single endpoint to manage users, and it's all just an Apple UI that you don't have any control over for security. And iOS 10, there's a lot of new stuff being announced. The big one is that there's going to be a home app built into the app, but built into the phone and on Apple TV and Apple Watch, which really increases the visibility. And then they added video and doorbell support. Before, with iOS 9 version, it was more phone-centric. Your phone triggers different things. With iOS 10, it's more about automated things that are kind of inanimate objects that can trigger events without you being around, using the Apple TV and iPads in your house. Like a motion sensor could trigger a light, or you can get a notification. You don't even have to be at home. So that seems to be the direction that it's going in iOS 10. So just a little bit about the structure. Pretty much Siri and the Apple Home app, they all pretty much have access. They all pretty much use the same APIs. I don't see any special features that Siri or the Home app uses that isn't in the the HomeKit framework they use for development. So as a third-party app developer, you have access to quite a bit, except for the user management, which is kind of built into the OS. Using HomeKit requires iCloud and iCloud Keychain, and that's how the home data is shared. And then below that, there's the HomeKit protocol, which communicates to devices. Right now, it communicates over BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, to devices that require batteries and don't have plugs, like the August Smart Lock, and Wi-Fi or Ethernet to other kinds of devices. This is the Philips lights. So the HomeKit protocol goes to the bridge, and then the bridge uses a different protocol, like Zigbee or some other protocol, to connect to the lights that are nearby. Another thing about HomeKit is that a lot of the code, like looking at the framework, a lot of it is based off of BLE, the concepts. Even if you're communicating with the device through Wi-Fi, a lot of the concepts in the HomeKit framework is based off of Bluetooth Low Energy. So this is just the Appleton Home, just to give you a sense of some of the things that you can do in the future, kind of with iOS 10. You can have smart lights in your home for mood lighting in your bedroom. You can have a thermostat that turns the heater on and off depending on the temperature. You've got your Apple TV at home, and that communicates with your smart locks, which tells if somebody's manually locked or unlocked the door, and lets you operate the lock even if you're not home, because it transparently connects all devices that are on that HomeKit house. On iOS 10, the iPad can act as kind of a bridge. So you can just have an iPad plugged in around, and that will make your lights automatically turn on when a motion sensor activates or something like that. Or it could turn lights on a particular schedule. You could have lights turn on automatically, like after sunset or something like that. This is some screenshot on the left of the Home app. And in the center is the control center, where you can swipe up from the bottom, of your phone like this. So you'll be able to really quickly access devices, and you just tap to flip something on and off, or just hard push to change the brightness of something in the app. And you can see some videos online of that. Siri is by far the dominant way of doing it. You can, I can just say, Siri, lock my door. Okay, and we've got a smart switch over there. Steve, is he here? Oh, okay. We had a demo planned, but looks like he's. Yeah. You ready? Okay. So we have a smart switch there. So Steve's gonna put down the toaster because. Okay. Ready? Okay. I turned the power off on the toaster. And it went out. That's a HomeKit smart switch. The only thing we could plug in here. I mean, I should have brought a lamp or something. That's all we could do. Okay, so how did all that work? Well, for the lock, that used Bluetooth Low Energy, which is otherwise known as Bluetooth Smart, BLE, or maybe there's other pronunciations of it. It's not your mom's Bluetooth headset, BLE, Bluetooth. It's a lower energy version. It uses a subset of the protocol that was first introduced in the iPhone 4S. It's now pretty much in all mobile devices. Its Bluetooth is named after the king of Denmark in the 10th century, if you're interested. I think he had Bluetooth. Bluetooth is a spread spectrum technology. It basically communicates just like the radio, but on a lot of different channels. That's why it's called spread spectrum. So just like a radio, there's a frequency, and it gets faster and slower to represent bits 1 and 0. It's at a particular frequency. It has kind of a short range, Usually for Bluetooth Low Energy, it's about like 30 or 40 feet unobstructed, and it could be significantly less if there's walls or things in the way. So one aspect of BLE is these generic attributes, otherwise known as GAT. So it's a common operations framework for data transport. So rather than having a complex kind of like command state machine back and forth, which is in some of the other Bluetooth technologies, there's just this concept of standard IDs that may be readable across devices. For example, like a pedometer, two different manufacturers of pedometer may have the same service that's available that can be read by any device because and all those different services are registered. So this is kind of what a profile of a Bluetooth device is. And there's a hierarchy. So a device might have a series of services, and each of those services have what are called characteristics, which have values that can be read and or written to, and you can also subscribe for notifications. So a lock might have a service for its state, and then you can read whether it's open or closed in a characteristic.
Hello, Rolf.
I don't know what happened there. There's a lot of standards for these characteristics. There's like a big database and stuff like that that's out there. For example, this only supports people up to 255 years of age. For the lock, you might have other services, even though it's just a lock. So these are two locks. They might both have a lock service and a thermometer service in case you need to know if it's overheating or if your house is on fire or something like that. And one lock might have an angle characteristic there to show like what angle it's being turned at or something like that. Another aspect of BLE is discovering devices. Generally, a device is always advertising at a specific rate, usually like a fraction of a second. Some really basic information, its ID, sometimes what services it supports, and it's a very low power thing. So this lock is always advertising 24/7, and a master device can listen to know that the device is around, and as part of that advertising protocol, you actually connect and open a connection, and there's not a lot of overhead with opening a connection. And once you're connected, it actually doesn't use a lot of power either, and you can just stay connected for a while if you want. So just a little bit more about BLE. So it uses 40 different frequency channels, and 4 of them are reserved for the advertising for opening a connection, and then the other channels are used. Okay, so moving on from Bluetooth to the HomeKit stuff. So HomeKit has its own protocol called HAP, which is like totally proprietary protocol using these characteristics and services, but they're all proprietary characteristics that aren't used by other companies. They just defined their own, they just piggybacked on the Bluetooth standard to create their own proprietary system that you use to connect with over BLE. So this lock actually can support HomeKit as well as our own proprietary protocol that's not HomeKit because it's Bluetooth and they just have different services available. There is also like a heavy encryption and pairing mechanism that Apple has. They have a lot of encryption and a way to set up a device where where basically every device comes with a code. And when you set up a device with OS, the camera just reads the code. So you just hold your phone up to the code. Sorry, I can't really demo it because I don't have an unconfigured device because we set up the toaster. But you just hit set up. It looks at the number, it sends it over, and pairs the device. The Wi-Fi component of HomeKit is just using all the same concepts, but it's just all tunneled over HTTP. So, and then it has other features, obviously, to support some of the new video things that are coming out in iOS 10. So, in case you're curious, Apple does have a security document where they kind of uncover a little bit about how the security works. It uses kind of a public key pair that when you pair with your phone, it creates a public key pair between your phone and the lock, And every time you communicate between the lock and the phone, it creates a new session, and that's torn down later on. So if somebody recorded your conversation, or whatever happened much later on, even if the key was cracked, that data wouldn't be decryptable, because that session it creates a new key every time. So it's actually pretty interesting to look at Apple's security document. They didn't publish this kind of stuff before, and so it's kind of interesting to read if you're interested. It's available online. Okay, so now from the iOS developer perspective, how do you develop with HomeKit? So I'll just start with Xcode. You just enable the HomeKit permissions, and there's a little button there to download the HomeKit simulator. The HomeKit simulator lets you simulate devices, so it's a much cheaper way to develop a HomeKit app if you don't actually have to buy new devices. So you can kind of create your own device, and you can see here that this device has a couple different characteristics. So there's a light bulb service, and then there's different characteristics, and you can just kind of add your own. It's much easier than making a physical device. You can literally kind of construct your own virtual device and use that for testing. So in your app, the first thing you need to do to enable HomeKit is instantiate HM Home Manager. I'm using Objective-C just to be kind of retro, since this NS Meetup. And it triggers a permission check. So if your app isn't like a purely HomeKit app, you may not want to do it until you really need to, because people have to. The dialogue says give access to home. It's kind of a scary dialogue box people see. Once it updates the homes and the home list changes, the delegate will pass did update homes or did update rooms, and that's needed when your app is running. And, if you need to reload your table or something like that, you get an update when things get changed outside the app. And I recommend only instantiating HomeKit Manager once. Definitely, it gets usually when you instantiate it, it has all the home data already, and sometimes things can get confusing if you do it multiple times, and we've seen some bugs from that. So there's other key classes. The Home Manager provides a list of homes that you have access to, and each home has a list of rooms, and you can also have a zone, which is a series of rooms. There's a user object, and as I mentioned before, a lot of the user management is deprecated. The one important thing for the users is to find out if the user is an administrator of the home, because you can't do a lot with adding accessories or deleting accessories, changing things, if you're not the administrator. So this is some useful code to check to see if a user is an administrator. Your accessory is called HM accessory, and so you can get a list of the accessories within a room or just within the entire home. And as I talked about before, every accessory has a series of services, and each service has a list of characteristics that you can access. A lock has a lock mechanism service, and it had to find out what its state is. There is the current lock mechanism state characteristic, which you can read. If you want to actually move the lock, there's actually a different characteristic, because this is a physical device, and what you want the state to become may not actually be what the current state is, because it might take a while to actually move. So they actually have a separate characteristic for where you want the lock to go. And that's true for a lot of physical devices. Another note is HM Home you can have a primary home, and often Siri gets confused if you have multiple homes. So it's very important to set the home as your primary home. Otherwise, sometimes it might not recognize some of your commands. Here is just a little snippet to get all of the lights in a house. There's a way to get all of the services of a particular type, which is useful if you want to know, if you want to find a particular set of things and turn all the lights off, for example. This would be a really useful snippet. So this is how to actually operate a lock. The constants, even in Swift, the constant names are really, really long. It doesn't really fit easily in a PowerPoint. So we have this constant lock mechanism secured and unsecured, and a device can be reachable or unreachable, which basically means that we see it advertising. It's basically tied in with Bluetooth and Bluetooth Low Energy for the Bluetooth case. So if it's not reachable, you don't even necessarily need to try. Typically, if a lock is not reachable, you can't actually do anything on it. So we just search for all the services in the lock that match what we're looking for, the mechanism, and then we find the target lock mechanism state characteristic, and we write the value, and we get a completion handler that takes a second or two, and it tells you if you were successful or not. So now we're getting into automation. You can basically create a action which is basically a series of things that you want to do, and basically a set of characteristics and what values you want to put them into, and those can be assigned to a scene, which can be accessed via Siri. So I'm going to say I'm leaving. Siri doesn't work great all the time. I'm leaving.
Hasta la casa, baby.
It said hasta la casa, baby. It says witty things. That's the cool thing about scenes, is that I guess it knows a little bit about you. There's a lot of kind of a preset recommended scenes, and you can have it do a whole bunch of stuff at once. And that's one of the primary ways people use HomeKit now, without a lot of the triggering and automation. So actually, I can't read this here. So now we're imagining like an alarm app, and you want to integrate it with HomeKit. So if you're going to wake up, you want the lights to turn on or something like that. So you can create a trigger and have a fire date. And there's a lot of different types of triggers you can create, and there's a lot of recurrence properties that you can use as well. But this is just something really simple. And then we add, we basically are creating an action set that we want to use with a trigger. And this is where we take the character write action. So we're basically writing the state of the light bulb and what brightness we want it to be. And the units are in lux, I believe. So 30 is kind of a normal light value. And now we can use that and add the action set to the trigger. When it's been added, then you add the trigger to the home, and then only once the trigger's been added to the home, then you can actually enable a trigger. And then it will turn your lights on at the specified time. There's a lot of callbacks that a lot of waiting and blocks involved with HomeKit. So it's a little bit of work if you want to handle error messages nicely. So HM event are things that can trigger things. So you can have a characteristic event, would be like the state of something. So for example, the state of a lock, you can have a characteristic event associated with a particular characteristic and its value. You can also have a location event, which is basically triggering like where you are and where the user is with their phone. Putting it all together, HM event triggers a scene when a combination of characteristics and location events occur. And there's some utility functions for creating predicates. You can do a lot of like is greater than, is less than. You can combine stuff together to have some pretty complex logic. This one on the bottom, predicate for evaluating trigger occurring before a significant event. The events that are supported are sunrise and sunset. So you can have something happen like 20 minutes after sunset or 10 minutes before sunrise. You can combine it with other things, like only if I'm home and the sun rises, do I turn on the lights or do I feed the cat or something like that. So other development tips. As I mentioned before, the HM Home Manager initiates the permission request. There are a lot of potential error messages for the user because people have to turn on HomeKit, keychain sharing. It's probably better to surface them directly from the OS because there's just so many different error messages, and they're actually pretty well written. There's some really great source code in the HM Catalog app, which they seem to keep it up with all of the latest HomeKit features. It's written in Swift. They handle errors really nicely with dispatch groups and Grand Central Dispatch. So there's actually not a lot of sample code out there for HomeKit. So that's a really good resource for seeing how things work. If you want to name service and accessible via Siri, the service name, that's what HomeKit looks at for Siri. And there's a lot of lack of documentation, surprisingly, and I had to look often in header files and sometimes online, sometimes header files, sometimes different places have the latest documentation. So that was kind of surprising because usually the documentation has all the latest stuff. Things you could do with HomeKit. You can augment an existing app like an alarm clock app, like a Halloween app. You could have like turn your house orange feature or something like that. The automation is getting more and more complex. So creating a tool that allow you very easily create some very simple automations or some very specific use case automations could be very useful. I think it would be cool to link it to Alexa. Maybe there's something already that links it to Alexa. I don't know. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about from a developer perspective if you actually want to make a HomeKit accessory. HomeKit, when you set up an accessory, they actually check for certification. So if you, for example, had some homebrew accessory, it would say, this accessory isn't supported. But right now, from what I hear, you still can set it up. It just has a lot of warning messages. It's not clear that will continue, but we'll see. If you're a company, Apple's MFI program is used for you really have to apply first because everything is kind of proprietary. And a lot of the major vendors have SDKs, like a Bluetooth chip might come with a HomeKit SDK, or Apple may provide something through the MFI program. But really, that's the way to get things, is to really talk with the chip vendors and the manufacturers. And there's an Apple certification process for anything that you ship and to get the Apple logo. And as I mentioned before, devices don't necessarily have to be exclusively HomeKit. Like our lock supports our own protocol and HomeKit as well. If you want to do your own homebrew HomeKit app, you can take, if you wanted to make a HomeKit toaster, you got it right there. You get a switch and plug it in. There's a couple open source, super unauthorized implementations out there that seem to work with iOS 9. There's Home Control implemented in Go. That's a programming language, not Pokemon Go. There's in Node.js. There's another one, and there may be others out there that are usable that you could put on a Raspberry Pi and use for your own homebrew HomeKit project. That's all. Anybody have any questions? I can answer questions.
So I've been messing with some hardware. I have Arduinos and Raspberry Pis with a Bluetooth module. Is it possible to configure that and set things up to start working with this? Or how would you recommend, basically the question is, how would you recommend someone who's interested in messing with Bluetooth learning that? How would you get started?
So the question was, how would you recommend somebody who has access to a Bluetooth chip on a Raspberry Pi? How would you get started with Bluetooth? Well, I think there's some Bluetooth libraries that are implemented in Node, for example, that you could use to actually kind of interact with devices in a high-level language like that. And I can't remember the exact platform, but you can basically define services, make them available, or initiate scan for devices in the area. That would be the simplest place to start, would just be to have your device scan for other Bluetooth devices in the area and then initiate a connection, and you might be able to read things. Because HomeKit is so proprietary, you wouldn't be able to get very far. I think these open source or illegal or whatever things, I don't think they support the Bluetooth. They have all of the code and the infrastructure to support the Bluetooth, but it seems like they mostly focus on internet-based stuff and Wi-Fi based stuff. So you could try building that for your device, and you could potentially extend that to support Bluetooth.
Yeah, because I can't like talk to my Tile or my August device, right? I can't just run my own app.
Your tile is there, and it's advertising. You can get the signal strength, so you can actually see where your tile is, because it's just tile. Most of the tile thing does is it just advertises, right? And it has a little bit of information about its ID. So just running using a Node or some other Bluetooth library and just scan for devices, you can see how far your tile is away, and that will tell you. So it'll know when you're home, right? If you have the tile on your bag, when you walk home, you can have your Raspberry Pi do something.
Two questions. One, I was under the impression, this is sort of related, but I was under the impression that tvOS doesn't support iCloud Keychain. So when you mentioned that HomeKit works off iCloud Keychain,
it uses the iCloud key. It uses it. So
okay. Is that an iOS 10 thing maybe, or?
No, it works in tvOS, the current tvOS, and iOS 9. When you enable HomeKit, it requires iCloud Keychain sharing in order to enable it. So I assume that that's what it's using on the Apple TV. And when there's problems, you need to sign out with Apple TV and sign back in. Yeah, I didn't talk a lot about the bridges, but it is pretty amazing that from an app developer's perspective, you really have no idea if your device is in the room or bridged over an iPad or an Apple TV. I guess you can figure it out if you look at the location. The user's location is not where the device is. But it works pretty seamlessly once you get it set up, and it'll be interesting to see if people use that a lot. It's kind of new. In the Home app, Apple says, you can do all this home automation through Apple TV and iPad, and they haven't. It's kind of hacky, because Bluetooth only works 30 feet, so it's you need to have an Apple TV around your house. Maybe Apple will come out with some smaller devices that can be bridges in the future if HomeKit takes off.
Second question was, what's your impression of HomeKit? Any shortcomings that you see, things you'd like to have as a developer of HomeKit, or?
Mostly we're focusing on our own products and making them work with it, so I don't have as much perspective from the outside. Actually, Sean, I work with Sean. I need to repeat the question. I'm sorry. Steve wants me to repeat the question. What are my impressions of HomeKit? It works pretty well when it works. Sometimes there's a lot of problems, particularly with the bridging and the Apple TV. You have to sign out and sign back in, and there's a little bit of work kind of getting that bridging functionality to work. And as you saw, Siri it's not always perfect, and it's a little bit confusing figuring out what you want to do. But it seems like the underlying technology works pretty well.
Yeah, I find using it as a developer, it's pretty easy, right? Basically, how you implement it in an app is pretty straightforward.
The APIs are pretty simple. So from a developer just doing some very simple stuff, you've got the accessory, the simulator, and it's some very simple endpoints. So just doing really basic stuff. It's certainly very fast getting up and running with it.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is it's Apple, right? So it only works in Apple.
Yeah, it's very closed.
Like all
It's a very
things Apple.
closed system. So don't expect it to work on your Android phone. Yeah.
This lock that you use in the Bluetooth BLE, can you use it to unlock for close proximity? Like if I'm right there holding the doorknob, it will unlock automatically?
Yeah, so with HomeKit and that last slide that I showed, this HM event trigger, which uses a combination of location events and characteristic states. Theoretically, you can say, if it's the evening and I'm in this location, meaning like I'm in my house, then unlock the door. So you can do stuff like that. At August, we actually have we have a system called Auto Unlock, which works after you leave the house. When you come home, the instant you walk up on the door, it automatically unlocks. And the way it does that is it keeps track of when you leave the area and when you're starting to come back, and it's always trying to connect to the lock. I don't know if you can do that with HomeKit. HomeKit, since it works over a bridge, it seems kind of weird, like it might get confused and accidentally unlock your door when you're not home yet. So I would be careful. I haven't really played with it, but if you don't mind having your door accidentally unlocked, you can try. Yeah, question?
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine doing testing. You write some code for this, want to make sure everything's working right. Is it difficult to write test cases or do some kind of automated testing? With HomeKit.
Well, in terms of testing devices, you can certainly very easily try stuff over and over and automate things. We'll just write code that runs stuff in a loop, and I can tell you I've done a lot of that. In terms of like testing some of these triggers and things like that, the problem is you don't have all the devices. So you basically have to use the simulator to create all these virtual devices, and then when people are testing your app in the field, you need to kind of get feedback whether it actually works. So that certainly could be a problem. And there's a lot of triggers that are based on location and date and time. So the simulator provides the ability to simulate your location. So you just have to simulate your date and time and some other features to trigger certain things. But I believe the simulator lets you simulate characteristic changes, so you can kind of see how everything works together. Somebody had a question over here? Yeah.
So have you ever had any problems with the BLE interference or anything like that?
Not as much as you would think. In our office, we literally have like 100 advertising devices. They're not all involved with HomeKit, but BLE is a pretty good technology for finding things in the area and for connecting. With Apple products, we have seen some problems with setup. Apple has a technology called WAC, which lets you bring a new accessory onto your Wi-Fi network. And you actually have to run that for Wi-Fi devices. You actually have to run that before doing the traditional HomeKit setup. And that's a little bit flaky. And HomeKit setup through Bluetooth, through our app, is flaky because it kind of relies on discovering devices that are around you that could be moving away and coming back and kind of dropping off the network. But once things are set up and it knows the device ID, it's pretty good. So I would say performance is only really impacted by setup, and then if in the situations where, like I said, with Apple TV, if things are more than like 20 or 30 feet away, the Bluetooth isn't going to really work well. So you got to have another bridge or just use your phone to connect with a device.
All right, let's give Rolf a round of applause.
Feel free to talk to me directly if you have any other questions.
All right, thanks
Yeah, we're
everybody.
hiring.
Yeah. Let Rolf know if you're interested. If you guys have any
ideas about topics or speakers, please come find me. And make sure you're following the NS Meetup Twitter account. We're going to be tweeting something and not emailing it pretty soon. So make sure you're following that. And there's a link to the slides that I just sent out a few minutes ago. So grab a drink, enjoy yourself. We're here till 9. Thanks for coming, guys.